Hello, everyone. Welcome to Data Management Plans, question and answer. My name is Andrea Schweitzer, and I'm the Research Services Librarian at the University of Manitoba. And for the next hour, we'll be walking through what data management plans are and hopefully addressing some of your questions. So the outline for today is starting with a brief tour of the Data Management Plan Assistant, or DMP Assistant, and followed by exploring some of the DMP exemplars that are now available thanks to Portage Network. And then finally, hopefully, getting more of an interaction between you and me about what questions you might have. And on that note, just to see if we can actually anticipate that, if there are questions that come to mind as I'm presenting, please put them in the question box. And when we get to the forum, I'll start sort of answering them so that we have something to talk about. And if you would rather mention it on audio over mic, at that point, I will be happy to release your mic if you put your hand up, and we can have a chat. So on that, we'll get started. So the data management plans, there's a lot of intersecting topics that will be alluded to here. Everything from data deposit, data sharing, more of a fundamentals around data management plans that I presented back in the spring. It gives sort of how data management plans fit into the research cycle. And so it's foundational concepts there, so that can be found in that presentation. And then also navigating open publishing. So when you're planning about your dissemination and how publishing considerations fit into data deposit. So if you haven't checked those out, or as I'm going along, you go, oh, I don't really actually know that, you might want to just check out some of these other presentations. So just to get us all warmed up with our audience and where you're at, I'm going to invite you to go to the survey and let's see where everyone's at. So I'm just going to put this in the chat box so you can click the link. And then the code, if you want to copy it down, is 377918 and then 7. And let's see if what we can figure out about where everyone's at. So great, one person's answered. All right, never made one. We've got approximately 7 people here, so we'll just wait and see how everyone answers. Okay, so of 4 out of 7 say they have not done a DMP before. So, okay, so we're starting from scratch, and that's fine. So we're gonna move on to the, okay, so the next slide here, this is for you to let me know which aspects of DMPs you want to learn about. Okay, so of the 4 people that seem to be participating, looks like the common one is people want to know why they should complete one, which is a pretty common question. And then the resources that are available to you to fill one out. And then what are the components, which we'll talk about as well. And then how to translate my research into a DMP. That one's going to be a bit tricky for me, and I'll explain why in a little while, but we'll see what we can do there. And then the platform is what we're going to talk about next. And then what kind of answers you provide, and that's also a bit tricky, but I will see what I can do. All right. So we're just going to exit out of this slide now. Oh, we got one person answering, move the rankings up. What are the components of a DMP is important? Okay, so we're gonna move on back to the presentation now and start right off into that, one of that key parts of what we were talking about in the survey there, which is what platform. So in North America, there are two data management platforms. There is the DMP Assistant, which is the Canadian platform, and then there's DMP Tool, which is the American one. And if you are a co-investigator or investigator for an American grant, like NIH or NSF or any of those, they, as part of their grant submissions, do require, for most of their grants, do require a DMP to be submitted as part of their grant requirements. And so, and they have gone so far now as to stipulate which template you use, which is found in the DMP tool, and you will fill that out and submit it. For Canadian grants, including our largest funder, which is the Tri-Agency, they currently don't request a DMP as part of a grant submission. However, the anticipated data management policy, which is likely going to be released in 2021, probably Q3 2021, will be suggesting, strongly encouraging the use of a data management plan. Not clear at this time whether that would be as part of a grant submission or some other type of submission as part of the research process, but so data management plans are definitely on the horizon for Canadian research. And so, as I said, if you have received funding from somewhere else, then you might have already encountered data management plan in some other form. So on that note, in terms of the why, not only will funders require them, it's just best practice. If you have required to submit to a research ethics board, a lot of the data management questions there are reflected in a data management plan. And quite honestly, if the better, if you have used a data management plan to work through some of those questions prior to an ethics submission, it does tend to make your ethics submission stronger and easier. So there's one incentive there as well. So on that note, I'm going to quickly walk you through the Data Management Plan Assistant, or DMP Assistant, just so you can get a sense of what it's like. I will say that the DMP Assistant platform right now will be undergoing a bit of a upgrade in the near future. So it will look a little bit different with the 2.0 release, which is anticipated in around February of 2021. So if you haven't seen our LibGuide on Research Data Management Guide, here it is. And this pretty much gives you everything that we will talk about in this presentation today, including reasons for why you'd want to fill out a DMP, what is a DMP, and then the breakout of the current data management plan templates. To actually get to the assistant, you just click on that link there, and you get to this platform. So if you've never filled out a DMP, you can sign up for the Portage in the platform right here. It's free, so nothing holding you back from how to do it now if you want. Okay, so this is my account here. And you'll see right here that I have currently 5 plans on my under my account that I have created in some way, shape, or form. And in this includes the ones that have been shared with me. So for example, I don't own the one under research intelligence gathering. It's owned by this other person that's listed here. So yes, you can actually share or have shared with you data management plans. So for example, if you're working under a PI and they have a data management plan underway and they wish you to contribute, they can actually share it with you, and you can go in and you can add things to it. So just to show you the demonstration version, I'm just going to click into that one. As part of filling one out, if you were to create one, and I can quickly show you that, it's pretty easy. You'll get sort of like a title page. You'll put in your name of the project. If it has a project ID, you would put that there. You would put your grant number there, principal investigator, ORCID IDs, and then a description of the project. And this template is based on the University of Manitoba template. And I'll get into why it would be of benefit to use it. And then underneath here is actually the breakout or table of contents of the template. So these are all the questions that are contained within the template. So to actually go to the questions, you click the next tab. Okay. And all the questions are collapsed here. But if you want to see what you've answered or haven't answered, you can go in here at this point and you can see the questions at the top, and then your answer, and then how you filled it out, and you can save it. The really good thing about using the University of Manitoba template is that we've attempted, when possible and when available, putting guidance that is specific to the University of Manitoba on the right-hand side here. So, for example, here, we talk about what is meant by conventions and procedures to structure and version control your files. So we give some guidance here about, how Dataverse can help you with thinking about versioning control if you wish to, as part of data deposit. Or this was, of course, before we had file share, like the University of Manitoba license of OneDrive. OneDrive is not to be confused with data deposit. It is totally different. However, when we did not have access to a licensed, secure, active file share platform, we were allowing some researchers to use Dataverse in that way. However, now that we do, we are moving back to Dataverse being a true data repository. So, moving on to the next section, you can see then again the breakout of the guidance is much more tailored and tries to be as specific as possible. The next component here is the share feature. And so, as you can see, I've shared this with someone else who wanted to sort of have some examples of the demo, like for their own purposes and filling out a DMP. And you can set the permissions however you want, and you can of course remove the access whenever you want. And then when you want to add a collaborator, again, it's pretty easy. You just put in their email address and then you set their permissions. And then finally, in the export option, the export is has several different options, including CSV and machine learning, machine readable, JSON, XML. So many different ways of exporting your DMP, depending on how what your needs are. So that, in a nutshell, is how the DMP platform works. To create a plan, it's just as easy as going up here to create a plan. And then you pick your organization. And University of Manitoba. And then as we build out our templates here, there will be more templates available. And hopefully in the nearish future, we'll have templates that are specific to sort of disciplines and that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to sign out here. And that kind of concludes the portage sort of walkthrough. And I just want to sort of break out the components of a data management plan in a little bit more detail if you didn't quite catch it during the walkthrough. But as I said, there's 7 components, starting with the data collection. So first of all, you need to think about what kind of data you're generating. And everyone, if data seems oblique to you in terms of how you consider your research, think about what objects you're working with and generating as part of your research, because everyone does. That's in essence what you're doing with research, and that goes for all the disciplines, from humanities all the way across. So chances are you're probably working with some kind of text. You may or may not be generating tabular data. You may or may not be generating graphical data or instrumental data or numerical data, or non-digital data. So it could, if you're in health sciences or biological sciences, it could be biological data. Or in the humanities, it could be you know, non-digital data, so mixed media and those kinds of things. So while the data management plan is written mostly from the perspective of the assumption that your assets are digital, they don't have to be. But chances are, even if it is non-digital, there is an intersection or relationship to digital data, and that's important to also document in a DMP. So you move on to the next, the file formats that will be used. So again, this kind of assumes that it's digital, but again, doesn't necessarily have to be. With the file formats, of course, you're talking about like .pdf, .csv, .rtf, all those other kinds of various formats across the entire spectrum of data. And then finally, naming conventions for versions and data architecture. So this is where we start to move into sort of documentation. So naming conventions are very important. And the more consistent you are and the more intentional you are about those conventions, the better you are for ensuring consistency, versioning, and prevention of data loss. And then next we move into documentation and metadata. So documentation, so you may have SOPs attached to your research that will further flesh out and provide more detail to various processes that that influence your research. Those probably would want to be mentioned. If there's particular instrumental data or manuals in that first question, then maybe you might want to add that. Or maybe there's specific education that's required in order to use, say, some software or whatever. You might want to mention that. So those are kinds of the question, those are kinds of points for that aspect. Best practices. So if you want to, if you're a lab manager or PI and your job is to make sure that everyone else is educated or aware of sort of the consistent practices that you require to make sure that everything is going in a coherent way, that would be outlined there. If you're modeling sort of naming conventions and you sort of have like a dummy root file structure, then you might want to point that there. In terms of metadata standards, if you're working in a particular discipline that has particular metadata standard, then you'd probably want to indicate that there. Storage and backup. Backup, there are best practices for backup that will be very much defined by what your research is. It can be very complex or it can be very simple, depending, of course, on your research. Depending on how complex your research is, we as in the libraries, will direct you to IT to discuss sort of your infrastructure and sort of documenting that, help documenting that. And in terms of your total storage requirements, again, it really depends on what kind of research you're doing. And then the access and location, again, depends on your research. You know, and also too, if you're doing multi-institutional collaborations, that is also going to be very much dependent on that as well. Data preservation, data deposit with an identifier is best practice. So this is all about sort of after the fact, where are you going to put things, why are you putting it there, how long are you planning to put it there, when are you planning to put there, all those good things. And then data access reuse. So all of these questions here, data access and reuse, we talk about more in the data curation presentation, as well as the data deposit presentation. Responsibility and resources. So again, this really is dependent on what type of research you're doing. You might have answered some of this if you have human ethics type research. This is where sort of DMP and some of these other questions too, in terms of storage, preservation, and access, all come back to sort of the research, the ethics of submission, if you've had to put an ethics submission in as part of your research. So one kind of informs the other. This is why DMPs, if you do one before you do an ethics submission, it really helps the ethics process. And then the cost, and then finally, ethics and legal compliance. So again, helping you think through like what are the risks, what are the sensitivities, any kind of copyright issues that you might need to think through. That's all in that part there. So we're now going to talk about some DMP exemplars. So what are these? This is a combination of fictional and real life DMP best examples that Portage Network have developed to support data management plans in Canada. So I pulled out 3 here. And what I've tried to do in the next few slides is just take a section that will help give some content, because a lot of people really don't understand how to translate their research into a DMP. And this is kind of where I wanted to do the interview, because this is how you get started with a DMP. Otherwise, it's really kind of hard to sort of explain in the abstract, but we'll start, we'll just go right now and start off with this one. So this one is from the first example, which is a digital humanities project. And so what they're doing is they're, so they call this digital humanities, but I'm kind of, this is more, I think, more of a social science project, to be perfectly honest. But I understand what they're saying with the humanities because it is textual, it's a type of text mining. So what they're doing is they're pulling, they're trying to put signposts, I guess, in census data, Canadian census data from the 1960s forward, and they've put it into sort of a database. So this project here, that's the project, and then this is the DMP section of this describing this project. So as you can see, in the data collection section, what they're describing here is what they're building. So they're collecting the census data into an InMagic version 15 database, and the file formats that will be included in there will include ASCII, HTML, or XHTML text files. And then they go on to describe what InMagic is, which is a content management system. So they're trying to give some signposts to researchers using the census data to better navigate the census data for better data extraction of census information. And then the next question is conventions or procedures that you'll use to structure, name, or version control your files. So here what they're saying is essentially they're just going to make sure that there's a log. And now this may seem basic, but sometimes a lot of people sort of lose the basic features when, especially if the research is complicated, or it's kind of assumed, and you may not necessarily think about it. And then if you don't think about it, you may forget to do it. So the nice thing about this is that it's telling you that they will make sure that it's tracked not only with timestamps, but the person who is making the changes, so that they can keep track of in case like there's a double versions, or there's something wrong with the version, or any other kind of sort of authenticity issues with the uploading of those files to the database. The next example is pulled from just gonna jump back a few slides so that you are aware of. So the next example is from the Dmp Exemplar, Computational Reproducibility and High Performance Computing. So if you think, you know what, I don't do that kind of research, it's not necessarily what you do and don't do, it's sort of the concepts that are sort of captured within the answers that is important to sort of note here. So the reason why I've highlighted project management is essentially that is what is key or principal to this particular question. So how will you make sure that the documentation is created or captured consistently throughout your project? So this particular research team for this particular project has decided that they are actually going to use a formal project management tool. But that might not be you. You might be doing other kinds of project management type of practices that may not be as formal as this, and that's fine. But the trick is for this question is just to outline what those are. And that's kind of what they then also did here. So they talk about the stakeholders reviewing the progress, all the discussions and decisions are documented in the backlog. And so they're talking about the tickets and all those things about how they're, you know, as part of that particular platform. And they also talk about GitHub. GitHub is also used as a type of project management tool, not just a software sort of repository thing. And so that's, if that's the type of research you're doing, GitHub could be an option. And they also talk about other types of sharing or active platform that they're using to sort of document and move the research along. So this is all very important because that way you have it down on paper. If you forget or you know, things change, you can go back into your data management plan and you can change or alter or update as the project goes along. And finally, this is the last project on that slide. So this is a Department of History project, and this is kind of key because I filled out the storage and backup section just so you can get a sense of how, again, the concepts. So why, you might wonder, do you have to sort of map out how big your research project's going to be? Because ultimately, depending on what kind of storage requirements you need, especially if your research is going to be very, very large, you need to plan ahead for that. It's very hard to sort of get a large amount of storage at the last minute, especially if it has, you know, security concerns or sensitivity concerns. So in this particular project, you'll see that they have, they're like, we've got a certain amount of server space now, but we have an arrangement with the library. And this is this particular exemplar comes from Simon Fraser University. And so you can see here that they've estimated the current space, but they're also projecting potentially how much space they might need. But again, as you can see, in the answers here, they're not really quite sure how this is going to grow. So they're sort of benchmarking, yeah, this is where we're at, likely going to grow, not sure how we're going to grow or what we're going to need. So, you know, this is where we're at. So, so you can see here in terms of access and contributing to the data throughout the project. Again, there's a documentation and process, and this is really important, especially again, sensitivity and defining who has access, when they had access, very important. And they talk about the Canadian instance of OSF as providing some assistance in terms of you know, documentation and version control. So I have created a Padlet forum for DMP FAQs at the University of Manitoba. So you can see from the link here, and I'm just going to sort of put it in the chat again if you want to check it out as I'm talking. You can actively contribute to it if you have a particular question that's not on that forum. So I've put the link out there in the chat. And you can certainly sort of scroll through and see we've sort of crowdsourced a little bit from the last presentation, questions from the presentation, and hopefully I'll be able to add to today's. All right, so at this point, with approximately 20 minutes or so, I'm happy to sort of answer more questions or have a conversation about where people are at. So first question I've received is, I'm not yet at the stage of research where I am generating data. So she's at the beginning, but she's interested to hear what I have to say about DMPs. So I've I've pretty much said what I can say sort of in the abstract without sort of going into more sort of discipline-specific types of questions or questions specifically related to your research. So I'm happy to unmute everyone, or if you want to put up your hand and then I can unmute you if you wanted to sort of have a chat. What I suggest, a beginning research, do a really light run through. So for example, should we just do a mock run through a DMP? Absolutely, that's a very good idea. A DMP can be used at many different levels. You can have it for a specific project, or if you're a PI starting out with your own research team and you have a career of research ahead of you, you might want to sort of create a DMP that's sort of like a higher level DMP, sort of overarching sort of SOPs that would address that would be relevant to particular areas within a DMP. So for example, if you have SOPs around data storage, you might list the SOPs that you create under that heading so that you know where they are and what you said, and so you almost use the data management plan as sort of like a big table of contents essentially for all your documentation that governs all of your research, and then you can constantly sort of refer to them as your research. The individual projects have specific requirements, but some of the principles remain the same. That is, should I do a run through using a course research lit review as a mock research piece? Okay, I think, Liz, I'm gonna have to unmute you so you can talk to me here. If you want to just unmute yourself and just explain to me a little bit better what you're trying to do there, that would be great. Unless she doesn't, okay. You can use a DMP in any kind of application, honestly, like even if it's for a research project, for a course. Oh, hi, Liz.
I just worked out how to do it. I was looking for the microphone in the wrong spot. It's a different tool. So just simply, I think I'm involved with a research project where someone else is taking care of the research material at the moment. But as I'm just starting out on a PhD, I was just thinking that if I went through the data management plan and just put in something that I'm handing in for a class assignment, so that I have it's basically a literature review, but it contains other elements. So if I put those steps into the data management plan, that would give a run through of how to use it based on what you've just said, what you've just been talking about.
In a very basic way, yes. Where the challenge of the DMP comes in is when your research starts to get a little bit more complicated. You're putting together your you have your thesis, you have your you have your committee. You're starting to sort of create your foundational documentation and those kinds of things, and then you're sort of thinking very forward into the future. It's that point where you probably want to, first of all, write out or talk to someone about what your research story is. What is it you're actually trying to do? And sometimes that can be kind of hard because you kind of get lost in your head, right? It's a lot of things. has a lot of like, you know, intersections and many things to think about all at the same time. And like I said, DMP has a lot of like intersecting concepts that you may not be very familiar with, like copyright, like data storage, like IT infrastructure, like access, all those things. And so that's where, you know, perhaps meeting with a librarian to get you started thinking about, you know, how to think about this. And then we will be happy to sort of refer you, like if you're like, well, you know, I am needing, my research is really sensitive, I need to have my own server structure, I need to have it well secured, I'm going to have like investigators from other institutions, then we're like, okay, well then you need to sit down with IT and you need to talk about, you know, what that looks like for you. Have you thought about a data sharing agreement that directs you to ORS? You know, and then hopefully then you start getting some of those answers and you start plugging those into the data management plan. So I think in terms of getting your feet wet and just sort of working through in a very simplistic way, yeah, absolutely. There's no, nothing should stop you from like even just trying to do it in a very basic way for sort of a course. But I will warn you that once you start getting into the sort of nitty-gritty of an actual research project, depending on how complicated your research is, then the questions can get, answering the questions or working through all the elements of a particular question can get much more difficult. So, and that's where I really want to emphasize again that it doesn't have to be all up to you to answer, and it doesn't have to be all up to you to work it through. This is where sort of consulting with me or consulting with like your liaison librarian, or you know, taking a data management plan and working it through with your peers might be a useful strategy.
Okay, thanks. That's good. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know that.
You're welcome. Anyone else? So this is sort of where the data management plan Q&A doesn't work very well unless unless you have specific questions. Can it be printed? Absolutely. Going back to that share feature in the data management plan assistant, the export option, you can print it however way you want. You can print it out as a Word document. You can print it out as a PDF document, SFV file, CSV file. There's many export options. Yes. And the new data management plan assistant, in fact, again, coming likely in winter 2021, we'll actually have more versioning control, many more features in terms of like editorializing and, you know, copy and pasting. So one thing right now that's a challenge in the current platform is that every single time you want a sort of new DMP, you have to sort of create it from scratch. Whereas the new platform that's coming will enable you to sort of essentially reuse an existing DMP or repurpose an existing DMP for, say, another project or whatever it is you're doing. And then, of course, change some of the questions accordingly. So going back to sort of that like multi-level types of DMP that I was talking about, you know, if you've got standards SOPs for certain sections and they're not going to change, then why change it, right? So again, the ability to tailor and streamline your DMPs to reflect the particular needs of a project is sort of where we're going with the new platform. So at this point, I'm actually welcome to anyone who is thinking about their research right now, and maybe you're not sure about how to answer some of the questions. So I'm happy to flip back through to the questions, and then if you want to think about you know, your research, I'm happy to try and do my best to sort of answer some of those components as much as I can, or direct you to people who could answer them. So here's the questions, the outline of the data management plan. So if you're thinking about your research right now, and you have specific questions, I'm happy to try and field them. You can put it in the chat, the question box, or I can, if you want to put up your hand, I'm happy to release your mic and you can talk it over on the audio. So if there isn't any more questions, I'm going to say goodbye. As I said, really strongly encourage you to look at a DMP. Does a DMP link with other features that a researcher might use, like Endnote or Indivo? So I'm not really quite sure. Endnote for sure. So for example, and I'm kind of guessing what you might be talking about. So for example, if you can always put a PDF, like as you share your or export your PDF of your export your DMP in whatever format that is. Of course, you can cite it. So so let's say you have it as part of the supplement of your thesis. Let's say you can, of course, create a citation for it, just like anything else. So you can put it in your EndNote and say, you know, this is DMP. And if you want to deposit your DMP together with, say, data, which is maybe not necessarily a bad thing, it's a very, I mean, it's another form of documentation, which is what its purpose is. So you can certainly cite it. And in terms of Indivo, I think I would have to have more information about what you were trying to do there beyond just using it, like citing it in Indivo. I don't. Would you text mine it? I don't think so. So yeah, you can certainly cite it. So like I said, it becomes another form of data, like everything else that you're generating as part of your research. But this is the intention of this is to be like the hub, the center, the governing map of all of your research. So as you go along, and you might get caught up in the weeds in your research, the DMP is to sort of help be the grounding tool for you. And as I say, it's not to be used as sort of set in stone. You start at the beginning and that's it. You constantly revisit it, check in. Have you changed things? If it's changed, you want to change your data management plan so it reflects. It is a living document. It should change as you change, and document those changes so that you keep track of things. So in terms of translating your research story, again, best thing is to, you know, write it down almost as a narrative, and then like without using the DMP template, and then see how your narrative fits into the template. And if there are points missing in your narrative, and so that means like you're trying to answer a particular question in the DMP template and you find it's not in your narrative, then chances are it's maybe something you haven't thought about, and maybe you need to go track that down. So again, you don't have to do this on your own. Please contact either myself or your liaison librarian, and we'll be happy to sort of make this a little bit more friendly and break it down, sort of talk to you about your research. What are you doing? We love to hear your story about what you're doing and how we can help you out. And if we don't know the answers, then we'll definitely refer you to the best people to answer them for you. All right, so on that note, it's if I'm not going to get any further questions, I'm going to call it a day, and I hope I'm just going to zip to the last slide. I just want you to read this quote here. I think I kind of repeated her, but most importantly on this quote is no researcher has to know or be everything. Okay. We are here to help you. We are here to talk to you about what your research is about and help your research process go a little easier. And so all that takes from you is just to reach out to us and let us know when we can talk to you, and we'll go from there. So on that note, that's the end of my presentation. I hope you found it valuable, and good luck on your DMP journey. So have a great day. Thanks for attending.